Well, hi everyone, and thanks for coming, and welcome to the fourth in our series showcasing the Digital Scholarship Lab. Throughout the spring, we're having Brown faculty and visiting speakers come to talk about digital technologies and how it impacts their work, and how specifically technologies like data visualization and analysis can help to open up new avenues for learning and scholarship for their students. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I want to announce that next week we will be happy to host Evan Gay of the Reveal project, and that's April 18th, same time next Thursday night. Reveal is an innovative data sensing, collection, and exploration tool currently being used at archaeological excavation sites around the world. Example data to be presented includes recording a complex cave site in Iceland, precisely recording in situ excavated artifacts in Israel, and high-resolution recording of minute cuneiform tablets. So that's next week at April 18th, or next week at 5:30. That's April 18th. And tonight, we are grateful to host John Cayley, professor of literary arts here at Brown University. His work explores the potential for writing digital media. John was the winner of the Electronic Literature Organization Award for Poetry 2001. He's taught at a number of universities in the United Kingdom, directed research at the University of California, San Diego, and was an honorary research associate in the Department of English, Royal Holloway College, University of London. For this presentation, he will share aspects of a work in progress on a piece of language-driven art adapted for the lab. John.
Okay, thanks very much. So first, a disclaimer, because the likelihood that one becomes flustered when trying to deal with one computer and one display is very high, as I'm sure you all know if you've ever tried it. In other words, things that are simple when you're doing them on your own and you're at your desk suddenly become impossible when you feel you're being overlooked or you have an audience. So you'll have to forgive me if there are falterings. I'm going to do the best job I can. The first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to ask you to take part, especially if there are a couple of you who are good with laptops and are willing to try and troubleshoot. If there is some troubleshooting with the laptops in particular, that would be great. And my purpose, or what I intend to do, is to present aspects of three works and to present them as, try to set them up to show them working as if they were installed. So if I were showing them for an aesthetic presentation. But also because of the way this lab is set up, to try and use the affordances of the lab to make it, in theory, or it seems to me, more possible for you to explain how these things work, right? Because it's my experience that I set up systems and they produce an effect. They're installed somewhere, and I get a chance to explain to people how they're working, and they find that cool and interesting. But it's hard for them to quickly get a grasp. And again, in theory, because the works I'm going to show you are all distributed. They're basically based on, I think it's true of all of them, they're based on the notion that there's one entity that's controlling the state of the piece. It's a dynamic piece, time-based piece. And this entity can distribute the states to any number of nodes, laptops, mobile devices, whatever. So those devices, as it were, can join the network. Right? If you can see, so in other words, what we've got here is a main display, which at the moment is blank. And this is actually showing the state of the beacon. I call the thing that is giving out the states the beacon. And then those two screens are connected to those two laptops. So you can see, if you were at those laptops, you're seeing on those screens what you would see if you had it in front of you. This screen is connected to, I'm going to get terribly confused. I think it's connected to this laptop, right? And in theory, what happens is that I change the states here and they all respond, okay? This is a piece that actually Harriet Hamasi was very generous in allowing me to install in the library in one of the computer labs. Because like I say, an arbitrary number of computers can connect to it. So, so that you can make an even bigger splash. It has a sound world, right? So all of these computers have a little speaker attached. And we haven't had time to test that. So that's one of the things that I'm going to ask people who are good with laptops to go to the laptops and if the sound isn't working, to try and get it working. If you have a laptop, right? Or for this one, just a laptop. For other ones, you can use a mobile device. You can go to this URL. Do it. You go to this URL, and then you can choose any of these links. And what should happen is that on your computer, a screen like this will open up, right? And then it will be part of the system and will respond. Okay? This piece is about, well, I'll start it up. Hold on. You see, I have another arbitrary device here, which is also attached to the beacon. And I can hopefully press that. And if it all works, you see the numbers, the 2's change to 1's. And this has started to respond. That started to respond. Right. Now I'm going to, I don't think the audio is muted. Maybe I have to. There we go. So, what would be very nice is if somebody goes to that laptop, Andy maybe, or somebody, or Hannah.
Which one?
Find the cursor.
So the monitor is off.
You got to look at the screen.
Take the cursor off to the right, and you'll see it up there. There you go. Yeah, you're up there.
And choose number 1.
Same with this one.
Oh, now you say give it permission.
Always run on the side. Very top. On the yellow bar, very top.
You'll have to be patient. It is working. It'll take a while. And then somebody can do number 2.
Translation.
So if you can turn them down a bit.
Translation attains its full meaning. Translation attains its
Are they both making noise?
translation.
Have you got it working?
Translation
So turn them down a bit.
Translation.
Just a little bit. Just for the moment.
Translation.
What? No, that's good. Okay, so before we let it go and let it do what it wants, I'm just going to explain the sort of things that are going on. This little legend here, D is for Deutsch. It means that this passage is in the state of being German. The little arrow means pointing upwards, means that it's surfacing, which means that over time the transliteration that goes on here will surface so as to become more legible. There's another state, so there's a state which is, I hope this keeps working. So I've changed it to zeros. You see zeros there in the beacon?
Translation attains its full. Translation attains its full. Translation.
So now it's doing what I call floating.
Translation attains its full. Translation
And the upper one is in E for English. Now it's changed to D. They're all floating in German. I'm going through this slowly just to sort of, so you get the idea. You following? Everybody following? And then they can also sync. So if I change them to twos, the twos means to sync. And you'll see the arrow will start pointing down.
Question.
Yeah?
The numbers are modulating tempo?
No. The numbers are, the top set of numbers are modulating language or text state. The bottom set of numbers are changing a sort of a metaphor, I call it buoyancy. So surfacing means surfacing towards construable natural language, and the floating is floating in a state where it changes letters back and forth in a way which suggests language, but isn't correct, orthographically correct. If you've been following, you'll follow that the computers are also changing the audio noise that they're making as the states change. Okay? There's one other thing that's going on, and that is that I'll make it surface again. I'll make it surface in English, so you can see what the text is. So you see, they start nattering away in something that's more construable. Right? And then this is surfacing in English slowly.
Translation attains its full. Translation attains its full. Translation attains its full. Translation attains its full. Translation
Each of the connected machines is doing what it's doing based on the states getting from the beacon.
Yes.
And you just happen to memorize what the beacon states mean to the machine, so you're just changing the beacon, it's C.
Yes.
But it's then still going to keep moving along, right? The beacon's going to keep changing numbers as it goes.
Yes.
In 18 seconds now.
Yes. To explain one of this beacon began its life driving this piece. But now the beacon is just a beacon. It's one of the things that I find intriguing about work like this. The beacon, you see it changes after 18 seconds. There's going to be a dramatic change after at least 86. So the beacon it's not random. It has randomness, but it has a pattern to it. And the fact is that anything could connect to the beacon. Any device that can read 8 numbers and divide them into groups of 2, 4. And you see now, it changed its state by itself, right? And the audio has changed. The patterns on the main display have changed, right? So, sorry?
And that beacon is just the URL addressable, there's another thing on the web that I can just hit direct.
Yes.
I haven't got that working, I'll try that.
What?
I haven't got the laptop bit working, what's the URL for direct beacon?
It's, oh gosh, now you're asking. I think it's literalart.net/beacon. You can try that. Sorry, that was a no. You can't have internet. It's working here, so it must work for you. You can definitely get it from literalart.net/DSL, and then you'll be able to get to one of the movies. These are actually movies that are working. Well, it'll depend on your equipment. It'll depend on if you have to have QuickTime installed. Try and I can't deal with all of the business of compatibility. We've done the best job that we could here, but I think that the thing that and before I move on to the next thing, I don't want to take up too much time with this. Perhaps we'll turn the lights down and let it run for a bit. Sure. And if it's possible for somebody to get the audio working on that'd be great, and the audio working on the other laptops. Those laptops are connected as well, so you could just use the links there. There you go.
Oh, I see. It's not up on the screen. It's hard to tell.
Someone has found the German.
It was working.
It's okay. You're just getting a taste of it. I'm letting it. I've brought it up to the surface again, so you can see what the text is. The text is from Walter Benjamin. It's from on the languages of man, on language as such.
Here, Mark, you want to see the speaker? Plug the speaker in here.
Oh, try it now. Red means on.
So you see, the beacon now changed again, and we have. They're all still surfacing, but it's changed to French in 2 cases. In the case of 2 of the passages. Okay, I'm going to bring the lights up slightly. Okay. So, what I want to, the point I want to make about the lab, I guess, which is one of the reasons why I'm here. I'm not primarily here to sort of give you an aesthetic experience, and that is to say that it was, or it seemed to me to be much easier to explain to you the nature of the piece and how it was put together. Because of the way I was able to link the laptops to various different parts of the screen and show what was occurring on different computers that were differently connected to the display. It seems to me it's not easy to do because you can't be in 5 places at once. But it is very revealing of a distributed system like this. So for the, you know, for I can imagine a whole number of possible setups that could be for this room that would exploit those facilities. I'm a little bit disappointed that we didn't get more of the audio because that piece with a lot of laptops with the sound swirling through it. The sound design is by a colleague of mine in London called Giles Perring, who designed it so that no matter what state it was in, it would always have a certain amount of harmony, and the making use of harmonic sequences. And it's very clever, and it works really well. And one of these days, I'd love to have, at a certain moment, the whole campus on, because it would be possible. The beacon could take it. And another thing that would be nice to do would be to have an exhibition in which arbitrary devices that could be controlled by something like the beacon could all be working together. So you'd have little robots that would suddenly be at the same time as the language noise changed, the little robots did something else. It seems like a good thing to try. Okay, at this point I'm going to try and switch to a new piece. So you'll have to bear with me again, okay? But it's good to see what one has to do in order to make the room operate. So now I'm going to get another piece up and running. I'm going to blank out these screens. For convenience, I'm mirroring the screen down here so that that's the one that I'm controlling. And I'm connecting the audio to that computer as well. I'm actually just driving one screen at the moment. And it takes a while to load. I don't think it's broken yet. So this piece is fairly straightforward. And I'm going to show you, this is where we're going into a project which is work in progress with a collaborator of mine who was also at Brown, Daniel C. Howe, who's an extremely good programmer. And although I'm a programmer, I'm not a professional grade programmer. And luckily, he is. And this is an example of something that we call a reader. This particular reader, it's reading through a part of a Samuel Beckett piece called, it's a part of the novel How It Is, a section of it which is known as The Image. And we're working with that text for a variety of reasons, apart from thinking that it's a wonderful text. But for the types of things that we're doing with it, it's very appropriate. One good thing about it has very little punctuation. This means that for processing text, it makes it a lot easier to not have to deal with the punctuation. We're experimenting with different types of, this is a thing we call the perceptual reader, because it keeps the point of focus more or less in the center. It's not one of those word-by-word readers that you see for speed reading on the internet, but it's similar to that. With this reader, if you wanted to read at its speed, you would just look in the center of the screen and just read the text. It would go through it. You're not seeing the paragraph breaks, but you are seeing something which I call the typographic neighborhood. And we that's one of the things that we work with. An aspect of the theory that I personally think is interesting is that I don't think reading ever takes place outside a dimension of reading which includes the typographic neighborhood. So one of the problems that we have for the future of reading is that we don't know what the shape we don't know how reading is going to be shaped in the future. We know it's going to be different, but we're not exactly sure how. So it would be perfectly conceivable, things we have devices that can manage it, to have reading be more like this and less like a page that turns, right? So it's sort of beholden on us to experiment with these sort of things. Obviously, that's not enough. It's certainly not enough to be doing anything aesthetic. There are all good cogs-eye reasons for speaking of this as a perceptual reader, because it is literally the case that as you read, you have a window that moves with your eye movement, and you can't focus on anything outside that window. It's quite a small window, and it's because of habits of reading. It's literally the case that if you just render that window and you contract the eyes more accurately enough, then your mind will recreate a whole page because you're so used to the idea of reading with a page, which I think is a phenomenal. In other words, it's like your peripheral vision isn't good, and you reconstruct the idea of a page because that's what reading is. So the perceptual reader is playing with that. But this reader is also doing something which we call it's reading in common phrases. And a thing we call sometimes we call them longest common phrases. So it's chopping, you'll see it's highlighting 4 words at a time, or sometimes less, sometimes more. It starts at about 4. And those are phrases that we've used automatic processes to look up on, in this case, Google, a search engine, right? And to make sure that we can find an example of that phrase that was not written by Samuel Beckett, right? So in other words, if you consider yourself only to being reading the red words, you're not reading Beckett, you're just reading common phrases that Beckett happened to have stitched into the great work that How It Is. Is it
making those searches now, or is that something that...
No, it's not making those searches now. You could, it can be done live, but it's difficult, and it's also against Google's terms of service. You'd be breaking their terms of service to do that.
Would you mind talking a little bit about what does it mean the typographical neighborhood exactly? Is that like all the elements in type?
No, I would like to talk about that, so if you don't mind, I will. I make a sharp distinction between the graphic, typographic support for language that is represented by typography and graphic design, and this other thing, which at the moment I'm calling the typographic dimension, it's a dimension of reading, right? So it's a set of habits that are associated with reading that are typically associated with typography and the graphics, but needn't be, right? So in concrete terms, what that means is that if you make the leap from, you say that old reading is over and we're going to go to new reading, which will be dynamic, words will move, they'll move around on the screen as individuals, then you've made a mistake. You're not reading anymore, you're doing something different. But if you take into account what the culture of reading is, which includes the dimension of reading, the typographic dimension, and you work with that, then you can move to sort of transitional areas where reading will work for people who are used to the current culture of reading, but you'll move on. If you want even more concrete, the tablet, which represents a new shape for the space-time of reading, right? And it is different from the book, but it allows reading. It already allows people to read and read well, or read differently, or something, right? And that's what we're in the middle of trying to investigate. But it's not the same as a book, but it has a relationship to a book, and you can see that it clings to the book desperately. And the clinging to the book desperately is not a bad thing. It's because because it has to, because otherwise we wouldn't recognize it as reading. And that plays out, that plays out in all sorts of ways. But anyway, this does have a more aesthetic dimension, this piece. Hopefully this will work.
It helps me to grow. If this is not paradise,
So I'm now skimming through the text.
Phases, where the skin still pulled as I flexed my fingers, having rid myself of the crazies to the left of me, wimps to the right. One side lost its mind by the pricking of my thumb. Something wicked this way comes.
So you can see
If you get something wrong,
thumb
it
wrong
will
there.
make many more problems down the road. But a sense of strangeness will not leave me. I can find nothing of myself in all these things. There is my mother. There is my sister.
I'm going to move again.
Close my eyes so I don't see the others.
I'm moving it to.
Save only the swinging arms.
Okay, there you go.
Those trunks of flesh bowing with hands clasped. What is your position now? Is anyone else in this situation? What should I do? In my free time at work, I give the right hand or left another color. Thus it becomes an undefinable object, and hence fascinating. Not good, not bad, ambivalent. Like death or fashion, it becomes present in her heart and constant.
Oh, sorry.
On the right, the extremity of the lake is visible and seems to stretch almost to the feet of the hills. It only means there is not a short leash connecting it to earth. This metaphor isn't too bad. It just gets muddled, and there should be a space between two of the large roots with room enough for her to lie down. She caught a glimpse of someone short in an ash-grey helmet ahead of her. He had succeeded in ambushing a dog of fair size, and this formless hugeness, in approaching, had knocked it askew
Trying to
on its hundreds, with a subtle pattern along its soft dark back, lying there over a big stone, with its head sunk down to earth. Some stillness of the sun in her reassured him. Beware of those hands. You are correct, questioned why some words. Stillness of the sun in her reassured him. Beware of those hands. You are correct, questioned why someone would need a leash in the first place.
Well, there we here we
Who
are.
can tell in this?
So here's the text.
It heralds virtue.
And you can see that
milk
the
swinging
red
soul,
phrases
emerges of tyranny,
are the
of
same as the bold
electricity
phrases here.
little by little, of a flame suddenly darting forth.
So, can anybody guess how this was done? Did you understand what was? Did you get what was happening? That you were hearing a text that contained successively all of the text of the Beckett, right? And that sounded sort of quasi-coherent but slightly crazy, right?
So you randomize it with the beacon or something?
No. It's not all about randomness.
Well, you said the beacon isn't going to be random, right? It's just
This isn't the beacon. This is not connected to the beacon.
Like Google Ngrams or something?
Yeah, if you this text here, you are correct to question why someone would need a leash in the first place. Who can tell in its imaginative wildness? It heralds verdure and lushness, milk springing from the soil, the emergence of tyranny, of an electricity disengaged little by little, of a flame. I can make it sound very coherent and interesting, right? And what it is it's. You remember I took those phrases and I looked for them in Google, and I found them with other text. Well, then the human in me then looked through the language that was returned to me, found bits of language that I found interesting, and then stitched it together at the point that is shared by not Beckett. So this text is written not by me, not by Beckett, by a whole number of other people, including quotations from other bits of English literature and poems and all sorts of things. And it's sort of quasi-automatically collaged. So it's a collage text, but it's an algorithmically generated collage text.
Do you take into account frequency when you're doing this collation, or is it purely subjective?
We have this notion, which is an interesting notion of the longest common phrase. All of these things, we use double quotes when doing the searches. So that returns effectively a sort of relatively frequency in the pseudo corpus that is represented by Google, or by Google's indexes. So yes, it's about frequencies, but the thing is that if you're looking for longest common phrases, typically about 4 words in English, or they're often as long as 4 words in English. 5 words is interestingly often unique to a text. 4 words, anybody's guess. 3 words, very unlikely to be unique to a text. The frequencies of those phrases will vary vastly depending on which words are in the phrases, but still those figures seem to hold. I mean, in my experience, there's probably studies of this in computational linguistics.
It's a very well-known technique in computational linguistics to look for the longest match.
Yeah.
But I formed the impression, listening to your constructive that you are actually choosing the one that looks like it, in a sense, rather than always choosing the most frequent or the least frequent.
Do you mean in the phrases?
Yes.
These particular phrases were generated purely. Sorry? Oh, this, yeah. No, the surrounding text is chosen by a human. So in other words, the context for the phrases was one of many possible texts that I went through and then picked out one that suited my purposes, right? Whatever those may or may not. Sorry?
That is entirely subjective. This is not a criticism. It's
No. Oh God, yeah.
Productivity is good.
Yes. Anyway, so again, sorry, yes, Harry?
This almost reminds me, excuse me, go ahead if you want.
Please go ahead. I have a silly question.
It reminds me of mixing, like DJs mixing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, there is this sort of strange paradox in the world of literature that mixing with language is considered to be a little bit more of a trespass on the moral rights of the author, of integrity and of attribution. And I think there are interesting sort of media specific reasons for that, but it's partly because it's very easy to do with language. But here it's a little bit different because the mixing is done by algorithm or quasi-algorithm. Which is sometimes done in music, but it's more often done in things like electronic music, for generating melodies or synthesizing sounds. So this I see as more allied to that than to remix, or to the type of collage which writers do a lot. Writers do a lot of collage, and they do it consciously, but they do it, I think, in a slightly different, or with a slightly different twist or inclination. So, I'm trying to remove myself from the initial part of the process and reinsert myself at this point, sort of. But I'm also trying to stick by the rules as I put it together, and I can't do what I want. I can't if it starts getting into dark territory and I want to pursue that, I may suddenly get jolted out of it by not finding enough, the bluey. What am I going to do with that if I'm stuck with that if I'm going to continue the process. But again, another yeah.
Why do you call it a form of reading then? Because I mean, at first when you showed this on the screen and you saw the highlighted words, I actually thought that you were talking about focusing the mind on reading those highlighted words or reading the center line or whatever. But now you're really talking about something very different.
The reason, I mean, if I should, if is there time? How are we doing for time?
You're fine.
We're doing fine. So the reason why I call it a reader is because it is highlighting the words, but it's doing it for a very specific reason. It's because it knows it started at the beginning of the text that it was examining and was looking for this thing, the longest common phrase, and then it just kept doing that. So it's a reader that is finding the longest common phrases in this text. So it's a reader that has a very specific purpose and strategy. And if we read with it, as it were, then we're reading according to its rhythms, or with some the redness of the phrase gives us an appreciation of what the sensibility of that little automatic reader is. Or that's one of the ways I would explain it. But there could be and if there's any interest in it, then it's because, do we read like that already? Probably we do. If we now have new prosthetic devices that allow us to give us constant access to search, does that mean that our strategies for reading are changing? Are we taking responsibility for those changes, or are we going along with them? There are a whole lot of quite deep issues that could be addressed by thinking about these things. I think the fact that all of symbolic practice is indexed by Google and we have instant access to those indexes is great, but I think that the fact that those indexes are proprietary and that they get first dibs at the analysis of the results of that data collection is possibly a little bit is something we should think deeply about. And the fact that we've been living with this for quite a while, and it has been possibly subtly changing the way we write and the way we read, even though we still think of ourselves as reading as we learn to read. But are we still reading in the same way? Even us sophisticated readers in universities, I don't think we are anymore. So I see this partly. I see if this has a sort of more critical dimension, it's to do with that.
John, I think I understand it, grasp, but does it tell you anything about Beckett's text or any text you might use in terms of?
Well, I mean that's a really interesting question. But so this is not about sort of distant reading or the linguistic analysis of texts. This is more, or I see this more as being about practices of reading and practices of writing. You can learn a lot about Beckett by analyzing frequencies and the vocabulary and whatnot. But that's not really about that. From this you could learn, I think, immediately, one of the obvious things, you could learn things about rhythm, right? These phrases pay no attention to rhythm, no attention to grammar per se. They pay attention to syntax, but it's syntax that is across what we would think of as a syntactic break. But if that's a common syntactic break, then I can find an instance of it in the indexes. It's not a problem. They allow you to search across syntactic breaks. But if you read, white of sky, moment still, April morning, in the mud it's, right? So it's a completely different rhythm, completely different sense of, anticipation of what's coming next. So that's, and I think that's significant. So, a defense, if you, so shall I show, I'll try and show the other example of other instances from the Readers Project. Sorry. Bear with me. Why isn't this working? View. Okay. For this one, if you want, you can follow along on your mobile devices. We could get all these other screens hooked up, but I'll begin by explaining it as it is. Okay? So here we have and you see how when I changed what we call the focus. So now the focus reader is this one in yellow, which we call the paragram reader. I'll explain in a minute. The screen went white. That means that it's showing that this is now the focused reader. I'll try and get another one going on here, shall I? Looks like it's doing something. It'll work. And Patrick, if you could get the others up, that would be great.
This one's working.
What?
This one should be working.
Okay, so,
Turn off the screen.
It should be on the external monitor.
oh, okay. All right. Okay, but if we could go to one of the other readers?
Oh, you don't want paragraph?
Yeah, we'll go to one of the other ones.
Okay. I'll do stitching on this one.
You can try stitching. Oh no, stitching is working. No, if you could put no, not the Mazzostic, the phrasing.
Okay.
Okay, so you could, if you wanted to, and this would include on your phone, you could go to literalart.net/DSL, and then you could pick any one of the readers, and you would be following the reader. The focus reader is currently this one called the paragram reader. And this is showing what it's reading. So if you see there's a correspondence here. Right. Yes? Make sense?
Yes.
There you go. Okay, there you go. So, start again. The text, the colored entities, the readers, are moving through this text. This one is the page turner. It got to the end of its page, and now it's there. It's the focused reader. We can see its output here. It's called a paragram reader. I'll explain that in a minute. I can change the focus to the phrasing reader. Right? It's now the page turner. The phrasing reader you might recognize. It's the one that is reading phrase by phrase through the text. We're working on this display because it isn't as clear as we'd like it to be. So it's showing anything in red is not Beckett. The other longer phrases are Beckett. Right? We couldn't find them without them being Beckett on the internet. Does that make sense? So the Mozostic reader now has focus. And the Mozostic reader is a classic, sort of a classic for a certain type of experimental literature. Cage did it, Jackson McClough did it. It's picking words that contain other particular letters. And so it says the image, it's, right? It's over, it's done. And you can read it by reading the capitals. And you can see that you can actually see the reader moving through the text. Oh, it was way over there, sorry. Where is it now? It should be in focus, so it should be the page turner. Something's gone wrong. We'll find it. So there it is. So you can see how that one works. And this one, if it's working, this is a brand new. I don't think it's working, so ignore that one. But this one is that longer text that I was reading out, and this should move to and stay with the red reader. You can probably get it to work from your phone. I think that gets confused when I'm focusing on readers here. So there again, I can show you the main display. On these other monitors, I can set it up so that you can see the distributed displays that are connected to the system, right? And the DSL lab does a good job of allowing me to do that, which otherwise would have been rather difficult to explain to you how this sort of work is set up. In installation, I mean, this is experimental. Trying to bring it out as a sort of an aesthetic project is still, I feel we still have a long way to go. But the sort of way it would be set up in a gallery is that you'd have the main display on a large monitor and then maybe a few iPads. We've done this before, a few iPads which are showing the auxiliary displays and that would follow it, and then a controller that would allow you to change the focus of the readers and to see that they're connected. And just to, probably the most, I mean, for me, the most interesting reader is the paragram reader. Although it may not be interesting for people who are into computational linguistics or natural language processing, because it's basically a sort of, it's a Markov chain reader, but it's a Markov chain reader that is working with its typographic neighborhood. For those of you who know what it means. For what that doesn't, for those of you who don't, it means that as it moves along, it looks at its neighboring words. And it looks at the words that are slightly above it to the, to what we call it the northeast and the southeast. And as you can see, it tends to head down the page like us normal readers do. But it can get distracted. It can go northeast sometimes, and it can go southeast sometimes, but it won't always go east, right? Like we do, or like we pretend we do. And again, if you read it, the idea is that because it also is sensitive to frequencies, the type of frequencies that you find when you analyze text, it does try to do a reasonable job. So it won't be distracted by a northeastern or southeastern neighbor unless that's that occurs elsewhere in natural English. It doesn't mean the syntax is always good, but it means that you get reasonable text. So if I just follow it, it can't be go having lost, will leave, and forward with little to, and the legs, and the suddenly another image, the last since there in the mud, another image, the last me, I look to me about 16 and to crown, I look to me about 16 and to crown, I look. You know, you can, I can see. So, but, and then this visualization of that reader is deliberately glitchy, and it also is deliberately referring to famous or relatively famous sort of visual art, language arts practitioners, Jung Hai Chung, Heavy Industries. So it's sort of a reader that is taking the sort of paragrammatic reading of the Beckett and translating. Oh, that's bad. Stop it. If we are, if I may believe, are the colors that may believe, the colors that we are if I, that we are if, that's a glitch, that shouldn't happen. Oh well, there you go. Yes, Harry?
Talk about why.
Sorry?
Talk about why.
Talk about why?
Yeah, like, why this kind of reader? I mean, like,
Why this kind of reader? Well, the original impetus for this project was a sort of the notion that if reading could be seen in terms of cellular automata, you know that game, which is like the thing called the game of life, where you have a number of black dots distributed sort of randomly in a space, and then you have rules for you have a phase. It goes through phases, and each phase, depending on what the black dots' neighbors are, they change, and these are demonstrated to be very interesting systems. They can be representations of actual Turing complete computers. You can do a lot with these very simple automata. So if reading was like that, what would it be like? Because reading is cell-like. The words come in cells. They come on a grid. But then it developed from that, because you realize that you can't just with a graphic cellular automata, you can go in any direction, and it'll still be interesting abstractly in terms of the patterns that are generated. But with reading is motivated by wanting to follow a line, or follow a thread, or follow different points of interest. And you know, I've also had a long-standing interest in text generation, and was interested in producing this is like a text generator. It's generating that text, but it's generating it out of the typographic neighborhood, out of this, with some responsibility to a particular dimension of reading, to more traditional reading strategies. Or that's how I see it. And then it also becomes, there's lots of other interesting things you could do with it, because the readers could look for lots of other things, right? You already saw that they look for letters. The mesostic readers looks for letters because it wants to spell something out, right? So you could learn something about a text by how long it takes it to find the letters for a particular word. You know, how far does it have to search to do that? That might or might not be interesting. So the notion has come about that we develop a set of readers that explore different reading strategies, and try and relate those to, you know, futures of readings, or aestheticized aestheticized practices of reading.
But surely that also leads not just to reading but to writing, because you borrowed Beckett, but one could imagine playing with these tools, creating a text that itself might not seem that meaningful until these readers got into them and turned them into something. Is that impossible?
Yeah, no, that's not impossible at all. Yeah, I mean building the readers is one thing. Then composing for them would be clearly the next stage. So at the moment, it feels a little bit like the Beckett is so interesting, and I mean, there are serious investigations going on here with the notion of what it means to have a language that is in common, right? And how much of it you can generate before it becomes yours, right? As opposed to just what we happen to be using when we're doing this. And so I think, and those are serious issues, and they're very serious. So dealing with an authoritative text like Beckett seems reasonable, and it also leads to certain aesthetic outcomes. But composing for the readers, yeah, that's something that has to be done. And there's also poetry, right? Poetry is structured language. Language where the features are non-randomly distributed throughout the text. So in other words, when you read poetry, I mean, especially, I mean, the obvious instance is rhyme. You read in a different way. You read looking for the rhymes. So if you visualize a reader that is looking for rhymes in prose, right? You could easily imagine a reader, which is something we want to do, which would show that, well, I mean, an obvious thing would show this prose has more rhymes in it than most prose, right? But you would see that as a pattern of jumps, say, through the text.
Rhymes per kilosyllable.
Sorry?
The new unit comes to mind, rhymes per kilosyllable.
Yeah. But I was going to show one. Oh yes, I know. I'll show one final thing, which is not. A lot of you will have seen this already. And it is just a sort of a squib. But this is a reader, right? And it's reading through a Chinese text and doing a translation on the fly. It's very simple in sort of computational terms. It's just looking up the character and then going to a place where there's a set of alternatives and replacing that character with a set of alternatives. So it'll keep reading through the poem, making these replacements. They'll change over time. So there was a certain sort of composing for this translation where I choose the set of alternatives, right? And I encode that. And then I let the reader run and see what it does. Now, this seems small, but I think that this sort of thing is really big in terms also of scholarship and critical practice. Because, as it were, you have the text and then you have the commentaries, or then you have the text and the annotations, the text and the explications. And those are clearly present in various different ways and linked in various different ways. But they could be manifested as readings, live readings. I mean, they are in a sense, you know, that we're used to the notion of hovering over a word and getting a definition, but the notion of sort of dynamic readings that are, as it were, encoding alternate readings or translations specifically, or commentaries. That seems something that is an area where it hasn't happened yet, but you could imagine other sort of strategies or frameworks for that to exist within what you would call scholarship, apart from what you'd call you know, aesthetic writing practice.
So kind of a distant corollary is some versions of 12-tone or serial music that certain things are decided and then other things are loosely allowed.
Yeah.
And I mean, Sean may want to talk about electronic music in that sense. But I mean, don't you think, Sean, there's a little bit of comparison?
Sure. Yeah.
But I mean, I absolutely agree with that. But I'm also, but here I'm thinking of, you know, I'm thinking of a sort of another way to display hardcore, say really scholarly translation. Right? So you would have a paragraph of or you know, like a verse of Dante, and then you would set the reader going, and the reader would show one person's translation, and then it would go through again and show the next person's translation, or it would intermix them. And you could do that very responsibly, right? It would all be pre-composed. There wouldn't be a random thing about it. But it would still be presenting it in a different way that is enabled by you know, just making reading dynamic rather than you know, time-stunned.
Do you know a writer called Stephen Emerson?
Yes.
You know, do you remember the Theatre of Semantic Poetry in Bayard?
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's a long time ago for me, but it was, I mean, at a very early stage.
Long time ago for everybody.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But it's sort of, yeah. I mean, this is someone who sort of would make maps from words to expanded or etymologically derived passages, and then generate text based on those maps. Which is something that I try and get my students to do, and they do it. They're actually pretty good at it. I think I more or less said all I have to say. And shown all.